You've probably seen the name everywhere, right? In magazines, on TV, at the doctor's office, Botox. It's become famous for smoothing out wrinkles. But the story behind it is pretty wild, because it involves one of the most powerful toxins known to science. So how did we manage to turn a potent poison into a go-to cosmetic treatment? Well, let's get into it. And that's really the big question, isn't it? How did something that's potentially dangerous out in the wild become this trusted, super precise tool used by millions of people? The journey from toxin to treatment is honestly a fascinating piece of science. Okay, so before we dive into the nitty-gritty science, we have to clear something up. We need to understand what we're actually talking about when we say the word Botox. Turns out it's a little more complicated than just that one name. Right. It's one of those classic situations where a brand name just takes over and becomes the word for the whole thing. You know, like how we say Kleenex when we just mean a tissue, or Google when we mean to search for something. Botox is just one player on a much bigger team. The reality is, the FDA has given the green light to several different products that all do a pretty similar job. So you might hear your doctor mention names like Dysport or Xeomin or Daxxify. They're all part of the same family, just slightly different recipes, you could say. So if Botox is just the brand, what's the actual stuff doing the work? Well, it's called botulinum toxin. It's a protein that's been super purified, and it comes from a bacterium you find in nature called Clostridium botulinum. And when I say it's powerful, I mean it is unbelievably potent. And here's where things get really interesting. In its raw, natural state, this toxin is no joke. In large amounts, it can cause a really serious illness called botulism. So the story of Botox is really a story about how science figured out how to tame this incredibly powerful substance and use it for good. So how in the world does this powerful toxin actually make wrinkles vanish? To get that, we need to zoom way, way in and see what's happening at a microscopic level, right where our nerves talk to our muscles. This is honestly the best way to think about it. Picture a light switch. Your nerve is the switch, your muscle is the light bulb, and there's a chemical messenger that acts like the electricity flowing through the wire. Botulinum toxin basically just gets in there and unplugs the wire for a little while. So here's how it pulls that off in 4 quick steps. First, the toxin latches onto the outside of the nerve cell, kind of like a key fitting into a lock. Then the nerve cell pulls it inside. Once it's in, the active part of the toxin gets released and it gets to work, physically blocking the release of that chemical messenger, which is called acetylcholine. Without that messenger, the signal to contract just never reaches the muscle. And boom, there's the result. The muscle that was constantly crunching up and creasing the skin, creating that frown line or those crow's feet, well, it just can't get the message anymore. It stays relaxed. And the skin on top of it gets to relax too, and it all smooths out. It's actually a really elegant and precise process. Okay, so the science is super cool, but what does all of this actually mean for the person getting the treatment? Let's walk through what that experience is actually like. Its versatility is pretty amazing. It's famous for tackling those wrinkles on the upper part of the face that come from making expressions, like frown lines and forehead furrows. But it's also used for a lot more, like softening a really square jawline, smoothing out bands on the neck, or even making tiny adjustments like lifting the corners of the mouth or fixing a smile that shows too much gum. And it's important to remember the results aren't forever. The effect usually starts to kick in within a few days. It hits its peak performance at about 2 to 4 weeks, and then it slowly fades away over the next 3 or 4 months as your body naturally builds new pathways for those nerve signals. Of course, anytime you're talking about a toxin, even a purified one, the big question on everyone's mind is safety. And it's also good to know how this kind of treatment stacks up against some of the other options out there. So, given where this stuff comes from, safety is obviously a huge deal. But because the doses used are so tiny and targeted to a specific spot, the most common side effects are usually really mild and temporary. We're talking a little bit of swelling or maybe a small bruise right where the injection was. Now, here's something that gets a lot of people confused. The difference between something like Botox and dermal fillers. They're both injectables, sure, but they work in totally different ways. Botulinum toxin relaxes muscles to stop them from making wrinkles. Fillers, on the other hand, add volume back. They literally fill in spaces that have lost their plumpness. So think of it like this. One stops the action, the other restores the structure. And of course, you've got the completely non-invasive options. There are topical creams with special peptides that try to copy the muscle-relaxing effect, but just on the surface of the skin. And then on the total opposite end of the spectrum, you've got things like facial exercises, which try to do the exact opposite, strengthen the muscles to tighten the skin. All right, so let's zoom back out for a second and just look at the big picture here. What's the main thing to take away from all of this? Take a look at this number, 20 units. That's a pretty standard dose for treating the frown lines between your eyebrows. Now, consider that a lethal dose would be somewhere around 2 to 3,000 units. This just hammers home the most important point. It is all about the dose. We are talking about incredibly tiny, incredibly precise amounts. And that really is the heart of the story. This isn't about putting a poison in your body. It's about using a really deep understanding of how our bodies work to use a powerful, natural tool for a very specific, very temporary, and very localized effect. It's the perfect example of science turning a bug into a feature. Which kind of leaves us with this final thought. We managed to take a potent bacterial toxin and turn it into one of the most popular aesthetic treatments on the entire planet. As we get better and better at understanding and controlling these powerful things in nature, it really makes you wonder, what comes next? What other amazing secrets is nature just waiting for us to discover?